Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me a great pleasure to be back in the House today after our recess as the newest member of the Green Caucus of Parliament, and as of today also the Deputy Leader of that party. As we know, Mr. Speaker, today we're here to talk about Bill C-2, the Act to amend the Control Drugs and Substances Act. Mr. Speaker, it's been very clear to me, and I think many Canadians, at least two-thirds of Canadians, now I guess it's three-quarters of Canadians, that we have a party across the way that if you're poor, if you're a single mom, if you're of color, if you're unemployed, if your government has unfairly cut off your EI, that's your fault. And that also extends to addictions. If you're in the unfortunate position, all too often caused by the sorts of things I just mentioned, to become addicted to a substance, that's entirely your fault. Your society has no blame. The government has no blame. And so we have a government here with an ideology and an attitude where they feel that it's a punishment attitude. Empathy is often lacking. Understanding of the root causes is often lacking. And if you're in that class of society that they feel are, pardon the expression, losers, that's your fault. Mr. Speaker, I don't think I can do any better than to read a little bit from the Canadian Nurses Association on why Bill C-2 is a very bad idea. I quote the recommendations of the Canadian Nurses Association. The federal government has the opportunity to create policy founded on the best scientific evidence while reducing costs to taxpayers, supporting vulnerable members of society, providing essential disease prevention services, and encouraging access to addiction treatment. Given the numerous benefits of safe injection sites to public health and safety, and if I may interject, the Supreme Court has indicated that they agree with the nurses on this. The Canadian Nurses Association recommends that the proposed legislation governing Section 56 amendments to CDSA be withdrawn, and that it be replaced by legislation that creates favorable conditions for the minister to grant exemptions in communities where evidence indicates that a safe injection site stands to decrease death and disease. They continue, this legislation must recognize access to health services as a human right for vulnerable groups, be based on the principles of harm reduction, not causing more harm, be founded on evidence-based practices to public health. Evidence-based, Mr. Speaker. Be developed in consultation with relevant stakeholders, including people who use those injection drugs. Consider the cost-saving benefits of safe injection sites to the Canadian healthcare system, and provide for reasonable establishment and evaluation periods prior to renewal. In addition, the Canadian Nurses Association recommends, Mr. Speaker, that harm reduction be reinstated as a fourth pillar in Canada's national anti-drug strategy. The Canadian Nurses Association recommends that the Auditor General review Canada's national anti-drug strategy every decade. And doing so will not only ensure that the strategy is modified if not meeting public health objectives, Mr. Speaker, it will also allow the strategy to integrate recent, effective, evidence-based public health interventions. So, Mr. Speaker, we've heard it said on many issues in this House having to do with environment, Statistics Canada, and now this. Canada needs and used to have policies based on evidence, on science. And today we have legislation like this one based on an ideology where if you're rich and powerful, if you're a winner, this party picks winners. And if you're a loser, it's your fault. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaires. The honourable member for Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable colleague and caucus mate for bringing forward some additional points around the ideology that underpins this bill. I'd spoken to it before our recess, and I find one of the things about C-2 that's the most distressing is that it's a disguised attempt to bring in by stealth measures that will defeat the purpose that the Supreme Court of Canada threw back to Parliament to meet. In other words, to ensure that security of the person is protected. The so-called conditions before a clinic for harm reduction can be opened in a community. There's more than 40 different conditions, including, I think, some that are just practically impossible, such as before you are even able to get permission to open such a clinic, you have to provide the background and resume and educational qualifications of the people you plan to hire. This is not a reasonable set of conditions. And I want to ask my honourable friend, I certainly have a lot of sympathy with the idea that a community where a harm reduction, needle exchange program, on-site reduction facility, such as the one that exists in Vancouver, is open in a community. I think the community should be consulted. But my view is that C-2 isn't a set of conditions for consulting a community, it's a set of conditions for defeating the instructions of the Supreme Court of Canada by stealth. And I wonder how he feels a community should be engaged in these decisions.
The honourable member for Thunder Bay, Superior North.
I agree with my honourable member from Sandwich Gulf Islands that safe injection sites shouldn't go everywhere. They shouldn't go anywhere. And they should involve community involvement by all the stakeholders. They should be thoughtful, evidence-based decisions based on some clear criteria. But as my honourable colleague has pointed out, we have a party here, at least some of the members of this party, and not all, but many, and especially those at the top in our current government, who don't believe in democracy. They don't really want to listen to the Supreme Court on several issues. We can think of others, I'm sure. And they really are not interested in a fair voting system. They're not interested in a fair system of parliamentary democracy at all. They're ideologically driven. They are bound to determined to do whatever it takes to get control, gain control, and push their own ideological agenda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaires. The honourable member for, I think I know by now, Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think the numbers speak for themselves as to why the funding should continue and that these inside injection places should actually continue. When we look at this, the rate of overdose deaths in East Vancouver dropped by 35% since inside actually opened. So it's about the health and safety of people and the well-being of communities. And those who use Insight services at least once a week were 1.7 times more likely to enroll in a detox program than those who visited infrequently. Over and over, what we've heard is that it's about the well-being of the community, it's about the well-being of the person, and it's about trying to get people into programs so that they can actually get out of their dependency. So maybe, I guess what I would like to ask my colleague is, by removing the funding, by not allowing these insight programs, does he think that the problem will actually go away or will actually get worse? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Thunder Bay, Superior North. You have 1 minute.
I would like to thank the member for Manitoulin, the hardworking member, for her good question. Mr. Speaker, it's very clear that this will not be a cost-saving measure. It's very clear to anyone with a brain that doing this kind of draconian thing and forcing people eventually into our prison systems at a cost of, say, $80,000 to $120,000 a year per person is a really dumb thing to do. And I thank the member for her very good question again.